Oh, wow. You haven't paid like half the mortgage.
I know that is that is not so much me. I think when we first talked about moving together, that was something that was really important to him.
Hello, and welcome to Financials Podcast Future Rich. I'm your host, Barbara Ginty, and I'm also a CFP, which is a certified financial planner. And I am here with my guest today, Gabby. Hi, Gabby.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Well, you have been a listener, so will you fill myself and the listeners in on all the good details? So, where you live, your age, how much you're making, what you do for your career, all the details.
Yeah, of course. So live in high cost of living city in the Midwest. I just turned 30, so very exciting, also a little scary. And I actually am in corporate finance and I make about 160,000 a year. And I have, a compensation structure with a target of 15%, but really can depend on, company performance, individual performance, all that good stuff.
Oh, nice. Okay, so your base is 160, and then you could make on top of that another up to 15%, depending on variables.
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. And then are you single, married?
Not married, but living with a partner in a house that I own. So I pay the
Okay.
mortgage, and then he pays me, essentially rent.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah, I was going to be curious how you did it.
Yes.
Um, Perfect. Okay, well, let's talk about your expenses.
Okay. So, I mean, the biggest one is going to be the mortgage. That is 2,400, and that includes the mortgage, the property taxes, and the insurance.
Okay, great. And then you bought recently, I believe?
2022. So,
Okay.
my interest rate isn't 7%, but it's not 3. I'm actually at 5.6. So I
Oh, that's
feel like
pretty
I'm in,
good. Yeah.
yeah, I think where I struggle is like, it's not super low, it's not super high. So I always am like back and forth of like, oh, should I, try to pay down the mortgage more? Should I put it more in investments? Like it just feels like such a tough middle ground number.
Number. And then what type of mortgage did you take out? Did you do a 30-year fixed?
Yeah, 30-year
Okay,
fixed.
perfect. And then how much did you put down about?
I think I
So
put
you
down
did
5%.
5%. Okay. Okay, perfect. So I feel like I do feel like I'm beating this to death, but I feel like I say it on every podcast. So since you've been a listener, you can tell me if you've heard this before. The historical average for a mortgage is closer to 7%.
Yeah, for sure.
So you did good. Now, but good is relative. And so when you're looking at, if you have friends that did, got a 3% mortgage, then yeah, five feels a lot higher. But if you're comparing it to a historical average, like where did you fall? 5.6 is pretty good. And you wouldn't refinance, right? There hasn't been a rate lower than that since you bought.
No, and I don't necessarily think the rate is terrible. And I mean, it allows me to do deductions like for my
Hmm.
taxes, and I live in a
Yes.
really high tax state. So like honestly, overall it's not too bad. I think it's, you know, I feel like I'm at this spot where, I'm maxing retirement accounts. I have, you know, basically other funds now, which,
Hmm.
I took this new job like maybe like a year and a half ago. And now that my partner is living with me and paying me rent, I mean, it's obviously a good problem to have, but it's like, what do I really want to do with maybe some of this extra like
Funny.
money, right? And like where do I want to invest not only for like future me, can I take some of this and do like home renovations? I don't know. I think those are the questions that I'm kind of like struggling with right now of like where to
Hmm.
prioritize.
Yeah, but this is a great place to be, right? Because
I
for
know
I feel like
it's not
for
really a problem.
no, it's not. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but
Yeah.
it's a good problem to have. Like in the beginning, it's so hard because you're stretching your dollars right so far, right? In the beginning of your career, you're not making as much. You might have more expenses with student loans, and your money doesn't go as far because you're not making as much of it. So this is you're getting to the point now, right, where you're kind of like cresting the top of the hill where you're like, okay, I have some breathing room. And now how am I going to allocate my funds to best serve me because I have that flexibility within my budget, which is that's good. That also means we'll go through the rest of your expenses. It also means you made good decisions with your expenses, right? Because some people continue to make money and feel like they're continuing to live paycheck to paycheck. And I'm sure you've listened to those podcasts where they'll say, I'm making more money than I've ever made, and I still feel like I don't have any money. And like that's indicative of like a more of a fundamental problem that they didn't have good
Yeah.
behavior at 50,000. So your behavior doesn't get better just because you make more money, right? Your financial behaviors usually just continue. They just bigger problems than smaller
Yeah.
problems. Yeah, because the saying always goes, if you can't manage $1,000, you can't manage 100,000. So,
Oh,
so this
that's good.
means
I
you've,
hadn't heard that one before. I like that.
yeah, it's true. It's true. Just because you make more money doesn't mean your financial problems will go away. Because if you don't have the discipline and the basic financial management skills down, then just having more money doesn't equate success. I think one group or couple that I had on that I thought was really interesting. They came on, they have a podcast. They do financial coaching, which is very different than financial planning
Mhm.
or financial advice. And her husband inherited money. They blew through the whole thing. Like they had never had that amount of money and they just was gone. And like they didn't really, it's a crazy story. So they decided to change and learn to have better behavior and that just, yeah. So I think it's really, I think that part of the money psychology aspect is like really fascinating that if you're not good with the thousand, you're doesn't just all of a sudden fix itself because you have more money.
For sure. And I feel like I know we're getting away from expenses, but I think that definitely like ties into like how I grew up and that like, you know, when I was really young, my parents both had good jobs and then just like life kind of hit and like 2008 hit and basically my parents, lost everything. So I feel
Wait,
like
how did they lose everything?
I mean they lost the house, like went under
Oh,
water on the house and
how old were you?
I was really young. So I would have probably been, in elementary school.
Hmm.
And so, I kind of lived through such a big shift in lifestyle so that I feel like as I kind of entered adulthood, you know, I saw that model and was like, okay, I want to make sure not that you can prepare for everything, but set myself up for hopefully success, right?
Yeah, and you can
Yes,
mitigate some of your
you can
risk
weather exactly.
so that you can weather some storms. And you're exactly right. There's like that 100-year storm that maybe we didn't plan for, and it's
Yeah.
going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot more. But if you're prepared for the regular storm, then you weather the 100-year storm a lot better than if you weren't prepared for any storm. So I'm curious, what was that like? So you lived in a house with your parents. Like, what was it like before 2008, and what was it like after? Because that's a huge difference, I would imagine.
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. You know, I was like pretty young at the time, but I think, definitely just a lifestyle switch, right? It felt like overnight. It probably wasn't, but um, I think when you're a kid too, like maybe I was spoiled, probably getting like a lot of what I wanted to like just not
Hmm.
having the money for that anymore, right? That's probably what I noticed like the most.
Hmm.
And then having to move, having to, move into a different house that was rented versus owned. And so, I mean, it was just a big lifestyle shift. And I'm sure I picked up on too, like differences in how my parents were. I'm sure they were really stressed. So, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a big change, right?
Yeah, and did they sit down and explain it? I don't know if you have siblings, or was it kind of just not talked about? Like we're moving, and it is what it is.
I mean, I was pretty young, so I don't remember having like an explicit conversation like about like this is kind of the why. I feel like that came on
Hmm.
later, but it was like, hey, we're gonna have to like move, things are gonna have to change. I did have siblings that were younger than I was, so
Okay,
I mean, they would have been really little. I would say
really little.
probably didn't notice any difference, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I think I was kind of the one that was a little bit older, so I kind of remember like the before and the after.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then, how are your parents today? I would imagine they're approaching retirement, if not retired.
Yeah, so I mean, I So they're divorced. So I would say they're doing a
Okay.
little bit differently. I would say my dad is probably doing a little bit better, you know, than my mom. It is something that I think about, just as I look to the future, like are there any expectations there that I'm going to have to plan for?
Yeah,
Right
that
now, I would say no. But, I see my dad in particular taking care of a parent on his side. I have
okay.
longevity in my family, so I feel like, I can predict the future of how long I'm going to live, but I'm like, I should probably plan on maybe a couple extra years, like just based on my family history.
Yeah, longevity is great, and people are living longer and longer.
Hmm.
It's funny if you look back historically, like with the CFP, like what did you plan for retirement? And now we're planning so much longer. Like if you look from like
Yeah.
what the original, like 10 to 20 years, and now it's like 15 to 30. It could be longer if you retire. I have clients that are retiring at like 55, and I'm like, okay, so for a female, living to 95 is like
A long
not
time.
uncommon. Yeah. And so that's 40 years if you retire at 55, 40. And then, but I don't want to plan, like, if you have longevity, I can't just say, oh, yeah, we'll plan to 95 because, like, what do we do at 96? Like, if you're feeling great and going to yoga, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
then you're
That's,
like, well,
yeah.
maybe we plan to 100. I mean, you don't definitively spend as much in your 90s from what we've seen. But yeah, you don't want to be like, well, we had you to 95 and you're 96. Um,
Here you
so
go.
here you beat the odds. Yes, it's really interesting with longevity, and then if you know you have it in your family, I do think it's important to plan for. But that was kind of what I was getting with the question is some people, and it's very specific, plan on helping parents in retirement if they do better. Depends on your culture, your family structure. Some people it's not a topic they would ever talk about, and other people feel like they might have to help a parent or a parent might move in later. So that's always something to be, conscious of.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's two sides. Some people are like, oh, my parents are going to pass away and I think I'll get money. And then other people are like, so I don't know that my parents have housing stability. So you just, everyone's situation is so different. And that's why personal finance is so interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that I wouldn't expect to inherit anything. If anything, I'll be giving some support, but
Okay.
I would say right now I don't have visibility into like what that would look like.
Look like. Okay. Yeah, just curious. Okay, so maybe do a little tangent. So your biggest expense is your mortgage is at 2,400, which is your taxes,
Yep.
insurance, and PMI. Your rate's 5.6%. And then what about from there?
Um, Next line item is going to be utilities. That averages like 400 a month. Obviously, a lot higher in the winter and a lot lower in the
Hmm.
summer. My car is 375.
Is that a lease or
And
you own it?
um, I actually own it now. It started as a lease, but I had a
Okay.
good buyout deal
Okay.
when it came to be renewed. So I was like, I'm just gonna buy
Take
the
it.
car because it'll be cheaper than getting a different car or leasing again. So,
Okay, perfect.
and then what else? My student loan is I'm paying 200 on it. I aggressively paid down my student loans when I first graduated. So I think I had like 30 when I first graduated. I got them down to like 10 right
Oh,
before
wow.
COVID. Yeah, so I did that in like 3 years, I think.
Okay.
And then when the student loans went on pause, like because I had paid them down so much, I just kind of left them.
Hmm.
Um, and then really prioritized funneling more into like retirement at that time.
Okay.
But when the student loan payments started back up, I just kind of started to pay like my old minimum, even though I think technically it's probably a lot less. And my
Hmm.
rates on those are like probably 3 to 4%, depending
Okay,
on.
so yeah, which one? Okay,
And
so that's not
then,
bad.
no, I would say, sorry, my car rate is not great, and I should have refinanced, and I just missed the window, and that's at like 7.
Okay, but not horrible. Not horrible.
No, it's not like
Not horrible.
20%.
Yeah, no, not like I've seen people like if you have bad credit, like I've seen those rates be quite high. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so
Yeah,
that's not bad.
I bought it through the dealer, so I don't think it was
Okay.
awful. And then my car insurance and then umbrella insurance is about 130.
Okay, I love that you have umbrella. So for people not listening, that's an additional insurance or not listening. for people who don't know, who are listening, who don't know what umbrella insurance is, it's another insurance that you add with your current provider. So you have homeowners, you have car insurance, and then you add
Hmm.
umbrella, which is kind of like a breakthrough protection. So if there was an incident and you went through your max on those policies, you have an additional umbrella. So if you think about like an umbrella over you. And how much is the umbrella for?
Ooh, I want to say it's 1 million.
That's usually they're 500 or a million, and then some people
Yeah.
go even higher. But yeah, okay, good. Perfect.
And then in terms of other expenses, I have a gym membership that's about 60 a month. And, I feel like I don't budget down to the level anymore of like food versus gas versus like home. I would say my target is to kind of, and eating out, right? I feel like my
Okay.
target funds for that kind of range from like maybe like 1,000 a month. And that would
Yep, for the
include like
extras.
clothes or, getting my nails done, anything like that would kind of fall in. So I'd say 1,000 to 1,200, kind of
Okay,
depending on the
the
month.
month.
Yeah. Other
Perfect.
expenses are probably so, in my paycheck too. So my paychecks are about 3,000 each, and I get paid bi-weekly, but I really just budget for like two a month.
2 a month. Okay.
Hmm. And then the other two just kind of go towards like general savings, travel, house projects, that type of thing.
Okay, perfect. And then what do you have down as your, I can add it up, but what do you have, because I think you're looking at a spreadsheet. What do you have down as your total for your expenses? The mortgage, utilities, your car, student loan, umbrella, gym, your et ceteras.
Yeah, so I think all of them together, I think it's about 5,000, but then my partner does pay me rent.
I was going to ask
Um,
that. Okay. So what does he pay?
he pays me 1,200.
Oh, wow. You haven't paid like half the mortgage.
I know. That is that is not so much me. I think when we first talked in or talked about moving together, that was something that was really important to him. And I think if we decide to get married, I would add him to the house.
Wait,
So,
wait, 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 wait. You don't
okay.
have to add him
No.
to the house. No, you do not have to add him to the house. That is
Yeah.
a personal decision. Do not feel obligated to add him to the house just because you get married. That is you. So what's interesting, and I don't think it's talked about a lot, is obviously there's a bit of a change where I don't know what he makes, but like where women are being the breadwinners and coming into relationships with a lot more assets than the men.
Mhm.
Um, you don't have to. It's a personal decision put your spouse on the mortgage. You you can on you want to put him on the mortgage is just in your name and then he owns the house, right? So you want to make sure that you think that decision through because you owe the money and he's not necessarily going to be on your mortgage, right? And if there was a problem, I will say what's really interesting if the mortgage is both names and then you get divorced, you have to like refinance oftentimes. So people who got those 3% rates and then got divorced, you lose
Oh
your rate.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Yep. And I had one person say to me, did not on the podcast, um, well, I want to keep the rate. I don't think I can afford the house without the rate. I'm just going to leave him on. And I was like, okay, let's play this through. He gets in a car accident and gets sued. He owns half your house, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to don't just because you get married, Adam, make it a conscious decision and think about what is in your best interest and I probably, haven't gotten a lot of slack for this. I probably will, but I'm a big believer in protecting yourself financially. Divorces do happen. Nobody goes into a marriage wanting divorce, and it only takes one person to want the divorce. It's like I learned that two people have to agree to get married. Only one person needs to want a divorce. You can't force another human being's behavior. And so if he were to come to you and say, I want a divorce, there's like nothing you can do. You can't force somebody to be in a marriage.
Yeah.
So
No. Good. That's a
you
good
just,
point.
yeah, you just want to think about it because I see a lot of divorces in my practice. And what happens is if you just put everyone, if everyone's just going to split everything, but you came into we'll go through your assets, but if you come into the marriage
Hmm.
with assets and you commingle everything, it depends on your state. So I'm not giving legal advice, but you put yourself at risk. And so you just want to make sure before you make those decisions, you think about how you want to structure things. And I'm a big, big, big believer in prenuptial agreements. I have one. So I think I was just surprised you saying half. That was the only surprise, but I think that's good. Okay. So, we'll get more through the assets. Okay. So were not living on all of your money. You're using basically 6,000 towards home improvements because you're getting paid 26 pay periods, not 24.
Mhm.
But your monthly expenses are roughly 5,000, and then you're getting 6,000 that you're using to live on, plus you get the other 1,200. So you have 7,200 coming in. So you have a nice gap between what your expenses are, not even including the two extra paychecks, and then what your monthly income is.
Yes. And then there's another 1,300 that gets taken out of my checks pre-tax for ESPP. So
Hmm. Okay.
that's also
So
not included in the
in
paycheck.
these in the paycheck. Okay, so your 6,000 monthly is your net after. So you're doing 401k
Yep.
and
HSA.
okay, and your 401k, are you maxing at the 23,500?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I just knew you were without even having to ask. I'm serious. Good behaviors. It because what did you make at your last job?
I think I was at around 130.
Okay, so you increased your compensation a lot,
Yes. Yep.
but you feel the difference.
I do. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay, so then you're in your HSA, and then you're doing 1,300 a month into the ESPP between both paychecks,
Yes,
or
because I think I do like the max that I can, which is
mhm,
10% of my
comp.
salary. So I put the 10% in, and then when it, you know, basically vests, right? I think the discount is, gosh, like 15, 10 to
Just
15, somewhere in
10%.
there.
Yeah. Okay. So for
Yep.
people who are listening who don't know what that means, that's an employee stock purchase plan. So you're buying your company's stock, publicly traded company, presumably.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. Um, okay, great. So we'll just throw out rough numbers. You have about 2,000 extra a month, give or take the month. Um, and then you're in your 401k, you're in your HSA, and then you're in your employee stock purchase plan. And then presumably you do health insurance there. So we have all those
Correct.
before we went over what your net pay was. Okay, great. So then let's talk about your savings, and I think we went over your debt, but we'll see if there's anything else because you have 10,000 left on student loans, and then you have the mortgage
Yes. And then I have the car, and I
and the
think I have
car.
like 14 left on the car.
Okay, 14 on the car, 10,000 on the.
Oh, I have my school loans now. 10,000 I think was like right before COVID, and
Oh,
then I
okay.
think I have about 7 left
Oh,
on them now.
7. Okay, perfect. Okay, 7, and then 14 on the car, and then you have your mortgage.
Yes. And I have, do you want what I have left on that?
Yeah, sure.
I think I have 290 left.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. And then how are you doing savings wise?
So that's a good question. So from like a cash perspective, right now, I would say I'm pretty cash heavy. I have like 46.
I could have guessed that. Which is good. Your textbook, you have very good habits. Okay, so 46,000 in cash.
Yeah, and I would say of the 46, like 30 is really the emergency fund, and
Hmm.
16 is really what I'm trying to save up for like home renovations, travel. If I want a baby at some point, I don't know, but I
Hmm.
probably want like a little cushion for if that does happen. So
Yep. So
that's
you did your I mean you followed the plan, which is your expenses are 5,000 a month and you have 6 months. So you didn't even include the rent as you didn't
no,
yep.
that's my little
Yep.
worst case scenario
Extra.
disaster
Yep.
brain. Yeah.
I don't have rent from my partner, and what are my, yes. Okay. So, and you'd probably spend less than 5 because, you probably wouldn't go out to dinner. But okay, great. So you have 6 months and then you have extra for other life events.
Yep, exactly. And then in terms of investments, I'm sitting pretty much right at 200K.
Amazing. Okay. And that's between the 401k and the ESPP.
That's really
Do you,
between the 401k. So the ESPP, when that actually, usually when that vests, like I just sell it and I'll
okay.
take the gain and either put that into my Roth or hold it in cash, like if I'm trying to
Okay.
like save
Save.
towards, yeah,
Okay, so you're not holding on to any of the stock. You're purchasing the stock at the discount, waiting till you vest, and then selling.
correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so then how much is in your 401k?
Yeah. So my 401ks are, where's my total here? That's 135.
Okay, great. And then you have a Roth, you said.
Yes. So my Roth is about 30. And then I think I have 15 in just a brokerage and then 20 in my HSA, which two is cash and 18 is invested.
Okay, so you have a little in cash and then some is invested. Okay.
Yep.
And sorry, say the brokerage again.
In the brokerage, I think I have about 14 or 15.
Okay, perfect. For those listening, when you say brokerage, what that essentially just means is you have an investment account that is not a retirement
Mhm.
account, it's a private account. And so the way that works is it's taxed differently than retirement accounts. It's fully available to you. You don't have to wait till you're 59 and a half. And ideally, you would be paying not tax advice, but it could fall under the capital gains rate versus the ordinary income rate. Um, so let's just see here though. Oh man, there is income limitations on the Roth, right?
Yeah, so I really started hitting that. Well, so I won't be able to contribute this year.
Mm-mm.
Um, but I was able to last year because
Okay.
with all my deductions. So last year I wasn't eligible for a full bonus because I had just started the job
Or did?
like late
Okay.
in the year. So I didn't quite hit the limit
For last
last
year.
year,
Okay.
but this year I will. So
Yeah.
right now I'm putting like 600 into the brokerage and then
Okay.
really saving the rest in cash. And
Right.
then the other just like little random thing that I do is I do save towards like a 529 um, just to get basically my state has like a deduction for it. So I just put a little bit in there. It's like I think it's like
Who
1200 a year or
is
something
it
like
for
that.
you? Are you the
I feel
recipient?
like it's
Who did
right
you
now I
open it
am.
for?
I think for me right now.
Okay. Yeah, because yeah, okay. So you put yourself down. So you're the owner and usually you put an adult and a minor, but it's
Well,
in your name
yes.
for the state deduction.
Yeah, and I just figure if I don't have kids and
You
I
can,
don't use it, I probably will know someone who does, like a
you can
niece or a
transfer it.
nephew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I
You're
don't
the
know. It
first person
wasn't,
I've heard of doing that. I mean, there's no reason not to, but okay, so you're
I think it just,
529.
yeah. So I feel like it just speaks to like, I'm kind of at this point where I'm like, where does it kind of make sense? Right. And
Hmm.
so I don't know. It was just something that I think my state had like a promo where if you put in a certain amount of money, they would like give you like $100. And I was like, I don't know. Why don't I just take
Just
advantage of
do
it? Like, why not?
amazing. Yeah, the 529 I think is a wonderful program. I don't think it's talked about a lot. They made some changes to it recently in that now the 529, if the funds are not used for an eligible expense up to 35,000 can be converted into a Roth, which is really nice. So also the crazy part about a 529 is it's allowed to be open for 30 years. So you use the date of either when the account was open for 30 years or from when a child graduates from high school. And you could change the transfer it to either like a first cousin or your own child. It's a very flexible program. And now with these new regulations, it could always be, if it's not used for education, it could be used for retirement, which I think is great.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay, great. All right, so we've got all the different accounts. We've got everything. Okay, good. So people always ask me like how much should I have saved, by certain
Hmm.
ages. And I believe the benchmark for 30 like Fidelity came out with a number because everyone loves a good benchmark, was like one-time salary. So you're there, which is great. But you're already maxing out the 401k, right? So then we can't put any
Hmm.
more in there. You're already maxing out your ESPP. There's limitations on that. You're maxing out all your work benefits, right?
Yep, exactly.
So then the next stage is what you're already doing, which is, you're no longer going to be eligible for the Roth, which is good. It's good that you did it. So here are two ideas. One is you continue to fund your brokerage account, which is what you're doing, and continue to build that up. You do have enough of an emergency fund. You have technically over 6 months because you also have rental income. So you continue to fund your brokerage account and you can use that. I don't recommend that for like short-term goals, like something in 2 years, but future family and 5 years or something like that, you can fund longer term goals using an investment account. Just you understand the risk is if the account goes down when you need the money, you might want to wait. The other thing to consider is because you have extra cash flow, if you still want to do Roth, this is going to affect your taxable income, but you could change your 401k to not be all pre-tax. And you could do like of the 23,500, you could say, I'm going to do, you know, 20,000 pre-tax. That gives me a good, you can look at your tax bracket and say that's still pretty effective from a tax standpoint. And then like 3,500 towards Roth. So you're still getting some dollars in there if you want,
Mhm.
now that you're in this higher income bracket. But that's personal preference. The only way to know what's right is if we knew what your tax bracket was going to be when you're retired, which we have no idea what that is going to be.
Yeah.
So one theory is at this stage of your life, and as you continue to make more money, you'll be in a very much higher bracket. And then in retirement, in theory, you might be in a lower bracket, in which case the pre-tax option is your best option. Um, so it just really depends. The way I think about it is you want to have a little bit of each type of money. And sadly, this ending got cut off. So we do apologize for the technical difficulty with this. But to finish my thought is usually a high income earner will use most of their deferral in their 401k as a pre-tax option because they are in a high bracket. And so what that ends up meaning is in retirement, the majority of the savings will be in um, pre-tax. So a traditional contribution inside of the 401k, so it would be aligned with a traditional IRA. Some monies in the Roth, and in this instance with Gabby, she could choose to look at her tax brackets and consult with an accountant and determine what would give her still a good tax break, but allow her to put some monies inside of her 401k into the Roth option as well, so she could continue to still save some inside of the 401k in the Roth feature versus all in pre-tax. But for her in this instance, it would be important to look at the tax bracket to make sure she's still getting the most savings for the breakdown of the contributions. And then additionally have some money in non-retirement, which would be held most likely in a brokerage account. As we know, there is no perfect solution. Everyone's situation is unique to their own goals, income, and personal situation. But also remember that when you get into retirement, if you are using the pre-tax option inside of your 401k or your work plan exclusively, there is availability to do what are called Roth conversions later on in either right before retirement or in retirement. So if you're not using Roth, I wouldn't stress. You can always plan to use it later on, either at the end of your career or in early retirement. So just because you don't use it today doesn't mean you can't use it in the future. So I think that's important to remember. Thank you for listening along to this episode. Apologies again about the technical difficulties at the end of this episode. We would just like to thank Gabby for coming on the show and sharing all of her information with us. This was a great episode. And if you would like to be a guest, we are in recording mode right now, and you can reach out to us on Instagram or on our website to submit to be a guest. The website is www.futurerichpodcast.com. Remember, we are interviewing women about their personal finances. So when you come on, you are anonymous. We will protect your identity, but we would like you to share all of your real information about how much you're earning, how much you're spending, and what your current savings and debt look like. So if you'd like to be on the show, send us a submission on our website, www.futurerichpodcast.com, or reach out to us on Instagram. Time for our disclaimer. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results. Make sure that you consult with your own legal, tax, and/or financial advisor before making any decisions.